For years they told us to be quiet on the ice. Don't even breathe too loud, the old-timers would say. You'll scare every fish for a mile. Well, what if that's the biggest lie in all of winter fishing? Today, we are going to explore a radical idea, something that goes against almost everything we've been taught. What if winter fish aren't scared of noise, but of absolute dead silence? Stick with me, because what I'm about to share could be the very reason you've been going home empty-handed, and it's going to change how you think about your spot on the ice forever. There's a reason why some days the fish seem to vanish, and it has nothing to do with your auger. Before we even start, let me know in the comments, are you as silent as a ghost angler, or do you think a little noise is okay? Let's see where we all stand on this. Every single one of us who has ever sat on a bucket in the freezing cold knows the feeling. You drill your holes, you meticulously set up your gear, you drop your bait down into the dark water, and then you wait, and you wait, and you wait. Hours of staring at a tip-up that never moves, or a flasher screen that stays depressingly blank. It is beyond frustrating. The old wisdom, the advice that's been passed down from our grandfathers and their grandfathers before them, was always about absolute stealth. Creep onto the ice, gently lower your gear. For heaven's sake, don't drop anything. The logic seems perfectly sound, right? A loud, unnatural bang on the ice has to be terrifying for a fish just a few feet below in the water. So we do it. We shush our buddies. We get annoyed by the guy with the loud snowmobile a quarter-mile away. We've been conditioned for decades to believe that silence equals success. But what if we've been looking at it all wrong? What if our efforts to be invisible are actually making us the most obvious threat on the lake? First, let's start by flipping the whole idea on its head. I want you to stop thinking of the world under the ice as a quiet, peaceful library. It's not. Think of it more like a vast, frozen desert. In a desert, what's scary? It's not the sound of a lizard skittering across a rock. It's not the sound of the wind. The scariest thing in a vast open space is unnatural silence. It's the complete and total absence of sound that puts every creature on high alert. That's when prey animals know a predator is stalking nearby. This void of sound is a universal danger signal in the natural world. So when you and your buddies creep out onto the ice and make a conscious effort to produce zero sound, you're not blending in. You are creating a bubble of unnatural quiet that screams danger to any fish in the area. You've become the silent stalker that every creature instinctively fears, and you didn't even realize it. So if it's not silent down there, what does a frozen lake normally sound like to a fish? It's not a rock concert, but it's far from silent. There are constant, subtle sounds and vibrations. You have the groaning and cracking of the ice itself, a sound they live with all winter long. You have the faint currents moving under the ice sheet, carrying with them tiny particles that brush against things. You have the sound of bait fish schools moving, their fins creating tiny pressure waves in the water. You even have the sounds of crayfish and other invertebrates moving along the bottom. This is the normal ambient noise of their world. This is the soundtrack of safety. It's a collection of vibrations that tells a walleye or a perch that everything is okay, that the ecosystem is functioning as it should. It's against this backdrop of normal, lifelike sounds that we have to measure our own impact. To understand why this matters, we have to talk about the fish's most important sensory organ for this discussion, the lateral line. You see, fish don't just hear with their ears the way we do. They feel their entire world. The lateral line is a system of sense organs running down the sides of their body that detects movement, vibration, and pressure gradients in the water. It is incredibly sensitive. A fish can use its lateral line to feel a struggling bait fish from yards away. It can feel the pressure wave of a larger predator approaching from behind. It's their sixth sense, a full-body sonar system that gives them a 360-degree picture of their surroundings. So when we talk about noise on the ice, we're not just talking about sound waves hitting their eardrums. We're talking about vibrations that their entire body reads like a book. This is a crucial distinction to make. We're not trying to avoid making noise. We're trying to control the vibrations we send. This leads us to the next point. Vibration is information. To a fish, every vibration tells a story. The frantic, high-frequency flutter of a dying minnow is a dinner bell. It's a clear signal that says, "Easy meal right here." The slow, rhythmic thumping of a large predator's tail fin is a signal that says, "Get out of here right now." A fish's brain is hardwired over millions of years to instantly interpret these vibrations and react accordingly. So, when you drop a heavy lead jig on the ice, that sharp thump isn't just a random noise. It's a specific vibrational signature. The question is, what story does that signature tell? We've always assumed it tells a story of danger. But what if it doesn't? What if it's just a piece of information that makes a curious fish say, "Huh, what was that?" and come to investigate the source of the disturbance? Now let's get specific about what a danger signature really sounds like. In the water, a predator's attack is fast, sudden, and creates a very specific pressure wave. Think of a pike lunging from a weed bed. It's a sudden burst of intense, focused energy. That's a true danger signal. Now compare that to the sound of you walking on the ice above. It's a heavy, rhythmic, and relatively slow vibration. Does that mimic a predator? Not really. It's just a large something moving around far above the fish's head. It's a piece of environmental data, but it's not necessarily a direct threat. The fish's brain has to decide, is this the specific vibration of something trying to eat me, or is it just part of the noisy world I live in? More often than not, unless it's a sudden, sharp crack right overhead, it might just be categorized as inconsequential noise. Okay, so if a bit of noise might not be the ultimate evil, let's go back to the idea of absolute silence. Imagine you're a perch, finning near the bottom. You're constantly feeling those subtle vibrations of life around you. Then, suddenly, an area of about 20 square feet right above you goes completely dead. The ambient vibrations just stop. In the animal kingdom, this almost always means one thing. A patient predator is now overhead. A heron standing perfectly still on the bank. A leopard waiting in a tree. A human angler trying to be stealthy on the ice. The absence of normal sound is a massive red flag. It creates a pocket of tension in the environment that tells the perch, something is wrong here. It's time to lock down or slowly sneak away. Your attempt at being quiet has made you the loudest thing on the lake. Let me paint you a picture you'll understand. Imagine you're a deer standing in the middle of the woods. All day long, you hear the sounds of life. You hear squirrels chattering and running up trees. You hear birds chirping. You hear the wind rustling the leaves. These sounds are your baseline for safety. They tell you that everything is normal. But what happens when all of that suddenly stops? Every bird goes quiet. Every squirrel freezes. That sudden, absolute silence is the most terrifying thing a deer can experience. It doesn't mean nothing is there. It means the one thing everything is afraid of is there. A predator. A hunter. That's when the deer bolts. Now take that exact same principle and apply it to a fish under a sheet of ice. The unnatural void of sound you create by being stealthy might be the very thing screaming predator to them. It's an instinct that transcends species. So what does this all mean for us, the guys sitting on buckets freezing our butts off? It means that our tiptoeing, our whispering, our painstaking efforts to not make a single sound might be the very thing sending a massive danger signal to every fish below. We're creating that unnatural void of sound. The fish might not know what we are, but their instincts tell them that when the world goes silent, it's time to be cautious. It tells them to stop feeding, to hunker down, and to wait for the perceived threat to pass. So you sit there for an hour in perfect silence, wondering why you're not getting any bites, while the fish below are frozen in place, wondering what kind of monster is sitting on their ceiling. It's a tragic, ironic misunderstanding between predator and prey, and we've been on the losing end of it for years. On the flip side, let's consider the sounds of life. What do those sound like to a fish? Think about it from their perspective. A crayfish scuttling across the rocks makes a faint clicking or scraping sound. A school of minnows feeding on algae makes subtle movements. A wounded baitfish creates a very specific, erratic vibration. These are all dinner bell sounds. They are signals of opportunity. Our lures and jigs are designed to imitate these very things. The subtle tap of a jig on the bottom. The rattle inside a lipless crankbait. These are noises we intentionally make to attract fish. So why do we believe that these small, attractive noises are good, but the sound of our boots shuffling on the ice is a deal breaker? It seems contradictory, doesn't it? The fish are perfectly capable of telling the difference between a dinner bell and a death knell. This brings us to the most controversial point of this whole discussion: the sound of your gas or electric auger. For most of us, the sound of an auger drilling a hole is the ultimate sin. It's loud, it's violent, and we're convinced it sends every fish running for the next county. But what if it's actually a fish attractant? Stay with me here. I know it sounds crazy. But think about what's happening. The auger is a massive disturbance. It's a huge source of vibration and sound. But it also does other things. It stirs up the bottom in shallow water, kicking up sediment and invertebrates. It sends a shockwave through the water that a curious predator, like a big pike or a walleye, might feel from a long way off. Instead of thinking danger, what if their brain thinks, massive event happening, might be an opportunity for an easy meal. I should go check it out. Think of the auger as a curiosity trigger. It's not a sound that fish are naturally afraid of, because nothing in their evolutionary history sounds like a 10-inch steel drill bit. It's a completely alien sound. And what do curious, opportunistic predators do when they encounter something new? They investigate. They don't immediately run and hide. They cautiously approach to see what all the fuss is about. They want to know if this major event is creating a feeding opportunity. Is it churning up food? Is it disorienting smaller fish? Is another large predator feeding and leaving scraps behind? This initial disturbance might be the very thing that pulls fish into your area from a distance. The silence that follows is what makes them nervous and unwilling to commit to biting your lure. I can tell you that I have seen this with my own 2 eyes, more times than I can count. I'll get to a spot, drill a hole, and immediately drop my transducer in. And within 1 to 2 minutes, I will mark a fish that comes directly under the hole. Sometimes it's a big, bold red line on the flasher. They aren't running away from the sound. They are swimming directly toward the source of it. They come in hot to see what just happened. Now, if I sit there in dead silence for the next 20 minutes, that fish might lose interest and drift away. The initial chaos brought them in, but the subsequent unnatural quiet made them suspicious. This experience, repeated over and over, is what started me down this path of questioning the old "be quiet" mantra. The proof is right there on the electronics for anyone to see. The opposite experience is often even more telling, and I bet you've had this happen to you. You're on a tough bite. You've been sitting on a spot for an hour, in total, focused silence. You haven't had a single mark on the flasher. It's a dead zone. Then, your buddy decides to pack it in. He walks over, clomping his boots, drops his tackle box on the ice with a loud thud right next to your hole, and starts talking to you. You're annoyed, thinking he's just ruined any chance you had. And then it happens. Your rod tip twitches. You look at your flasher, and there it is. A fish has appeared out of nowhere and inhaled your lure. Was it a coincidence? After it happens a dozen times, you start to realize it's probably not. That disturbance, that bad noise, is what likely triggered that fish to finally commit. So we need to start reevaluating what we consider bad noise. A sharp, high-frequency metallic clang from dropping a pair of pliers is a very different vibrational signature than the low-frequency rhythmic thump-thump-thump of you walking around your hole. Fish, with their highly tuned lateral lines, can absolutely distinguish between these sounds. A sudden, unexpected crack in the ice right next to them is a legitimate threat signal that might spook them. But the consistent, predictable sound of human activity, that's a different story entirely. We need to be more nuanced in our thinking. It's not about noise versus no noise. It's about threatening vibrations versus non-threatening or even interesting vibrations. That is where the real secret lies, and it's what separates the consistently successful anglers from the ones who just get lucky. Another critical factor here is conditioning. On a busy, popular lake on a Saturday, fish are constantly bombarded with noise. They hear snowmobiles racing by, dozens of augers drilling, people talking, and gear being dropped on the ice all day long. For the fish living in that environment, these sounds become part of their normal world. They learn to associate these sounds with the presence of anglers, but not necessarily with immediate life-threatening danger. They get conditioned to it. On a lake like that, your attempts to be silent are completely pointless and, as we've discussed, might even be counterproductive. On a remote, rarely fished backwoods pond, the fish might be more sensitive. But even there, absolute silence is still the bigger anomaly. You have to learn to read the environment and understand what normal sounds like for the fish in that specific body of water. All right, so this is all great in theory, but how do we actually use this information to catch more fish? The key is not to be obnoxious or careless, but to intentionally create subtle, lifelike sounds. This is the part that can be a real game changer for your fishing. Instead of just letting your lure sit perfectly still, fearing any movement, start thinking about how to make it sound alive. Don't be afraid to give it a few deliberate taps on the bottom. Not a huge mud-stirring pound, but a few little thump-thump-thump sounds. You're mimicking a feeding creature, a crayfish or a sculpin. You're sending out a vibration that says food to any fish in the area. This small change in your jigging cadence can be the difference between a blank screen and an active bite. It's about creating a positive sound, not just avoiding a negative one. Here is a simple experiment I want you to try next time you're on the ice and the bite is slow. After you've been sitting silently for a while with no results, I want you to intentionally make a little noise. Take your ice scoop and tap it on the ice a few times near your hole. Not a crazy loud bang, just a few solid taps. Then, immediately go back to jigging, or try scraping the ice around your hole with your boot for a few seconds. Create a little disturbance. Pay very close attention to your flasher or your rod tip in the 60 seconds that follow. I am willing to bet that more often than you'd think, you will see a fish appear on your screen. You have just rung the dinner bell. You've sent out a vibration that broke the silence and told a nearby neutral fish that something is happening over here, and it might be worth checking out. It works way more often than it should. Another thing to think about is your own movement on the ice. We've been trained to sit like statues, to become part of the landscape. But what if that's the wrong move? Instead of staying frozen in one spot for an hour, try shuffling your feet occasionally. The gentle, low-frequency vibrations created by your boots on the ice can travel a surprising distance through the water. You're not trying to stomp or jump. You're just trying to signal something is alive up here. It breaks the monotony of the silence. Think of it like this. Your jig is the main attraction, but the subtle sounds you make with your body are the advertisements that draw fish in from farther away. It's about creating an entire zone of subtle, non-threatening activity with your bait at the very center of it all. Now, let me be very clear about something. This is not an excuse to go out on the ice and have a party. This isn't about throwing your gear around, running and jumping, or blasting music. That kind of chaotic, unpredictable noise is still likely to be a negative factor. This is about understanding the crucial difference between a threatening sound and an interesting one. A sudden, sharp crack is bad. A consistent rhythmic noise, like a generator running 100 yards away, is often neutral or even good. An intentional, subtle tap of your lure on the bottom is a positive attractant. The key is to be deliberate. Think about every sound you make and the story it tells the fish below. Are you telling them a story of danger, or are you telling them a story of opportunity? The choice is entirely up to you. The biggest takeaway here, the one thing I want you to remember from all of this, is to stop living in fear of every little sound. The ice fishing world is full of paranoia about noise, and I believe a lot of it is misplaced. Instead of fearing sound, start thinking about how to use sound and vibration as another tool in your arsenal, just like your rod or your lure selection. Start thinking like a fish. What does total dead silence mean in their world? It means hide. What does a little bit of activity, a little bit of vibration, a little bit of noise mean? It could mean an easy meal is just a few feet away. By changing your mindset from one of stealth to one of strategic noisemaking, you can fundamentally change your success rate on the ice. You're no longer hiding from the fish. You're actively calling them in for a look. So, let's wrap this all up. For generations, we've been drilled with the idea that silence is golden when you're ice fishing. But the evidence, the logic, and the very nature of a fish's survival instincts might point to the exact opposite conclusion. That absolute unnatural silence we work so hard to create could be the biggest fish repellent there is. The real mind-blowing moment, the big aha discovery, is when you realize you're not trying to be a ghost on the ice. You're trying to imitate life. You're trying to sound like a natural part of the ecosystem, not an alien intruder holding its breath. This completely flips the script. Instead of worrying about every footstep or the scrape of your sled, you can start thinking about how to use those vibrations to your advantage, to call fish in, to trigger their curiosity, and to turn a dead day into a memorable one. Thank you for watching and for being open to a crazy new idea. If this changed your perspective, do me a favor and hit that like button. It really helps the channel. And make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss our next video where we put this exact theory to the test on the ice. Now I really want to hear from you. After hearing all this, what's your take? Is this a complete game changer, or is it the craziest thing you've ever heard? Let me know your best noise on the ice story in the comments below. Let's get a real discussion going.